Hello everyone, this is Crystal. Welcome to Artantastic, where creativity comes alive. Today's video is dedicated to my Josh, who has always loved the outdoors, loves dinosaurs and all animals, enjoys camping, and who has turned 21 years today. Happy birthday, Josh. Today we'll paint an abstract scenery of distant hills touched by twilight, reminiscent of Joshua's camping days. And for that I'm going to use Yupo paper and Copic alcohol inks. I'm going to use just 4 basic colors, but we begin with drenching the canvas with isopropyl. And that's peacock blue. I just love that color. And that's Nara's magenta. That's the only color from Nara that I'm using. That's moss green. And now I just tilt the paper and allow the inks to do their thing. Remember, each time you paint like this, the inks will always act differently. I let it dry now, and I just tease in the color where there's none or where it's too light. It's been raining here in India, and that's unusual. We don't get rain in December. But when that happens, the inks sometimes act up. So let's see how this one goes. Let's have a tree right there, a nice crooked one. For this I've used a combination of colors, a little magenta and a little moss green, just a tad of blue. Let's have a lot of texture and character. I love my trees to be crooked and unique. Remember, when you're painting like this using alcohol inks, you need to take very little isopropyl and very little ink. If you don't do that, your ink will tend to bleed and blot all over your paper, and you don't want that. I'm just adding a little highlight there, darkening the edges a little. And then if I want to lighten the tree, I can lift the color too, you'll see. But now let's have another tree starting right from the very edge of the sheet right there. I've used moss green to start with. I'm just giving the bark a little more definition before I add the other colors onto it. That's the same mixture that I used for the other tree, but maybe there's a touch more magenta in that. I'm just going to add a little more texture. I'm going to build the texture as we go along. So as the ink dries, I can either lift or add more color, depending on how I want it to look. You can see I've lifted some of the color at the end there. To do that, I've just added a very touch of isopropyl to my brush, and I gently lift the excess color. That's how I build texture for these tree trunks. Just building up on that trunk again. And to add a few more branches. Just starting to build up the first layer of stones on the ground. I'm going to have the stones reflecting some of the colors, and I'm not really thinking about where I'm placing them. I'm just letting the brush glide across the paper. But I'm using very little ink and very little isopropyl. If you add too much, it's going to blot and bleed on the paper, and you get all kinds of crazy shapes that are most unrock-like. You wouldn't want that. When I do landscapes like this, I build everything up in layers. You'll see as I do the rocks in the foreground, I allow it to dry and then I'll add another layer and more color. But very carefully, you'll see how I do it. It's not difficult to paint with alcohol inks. In fact, it's great fun, and every time it's a new experience. The inks always seem to have a mind of their own, and each time you try to paint with alcohol inks and it's acting in a particular way, you need to be able to manipulate it so that you can create the effect that you want. It can be challenging sometimes, and I've made a mess many times, but in the end, I do think it's an extremely rewarding experience and everyone must try it. I've been slowly adding a little more color to the foreground. So in addition to the blue, the pink and the moss green, I have also added yellow just to make it interesting. I think yellow brightens it up. I'm coaxing in some green now, and I'll be doing a lot of that as I build up the layers to my foreground. I'll add a little bit of pink, some more yellow, a tiny bit of blue, just to make it look a little more enchanting. I must warn you though, alcohol inks are an interesting medium to work with, but you must be careful. Always wear a face mask. I am guilty of not been doing that, and it affects my throat, and you must wear gloves, because if you don't, it can affect your skin as it has mine. But despite everything, I thoroughly enjoy painting with alcohol inks, and that's why I invite all of you to try it. It's very rewarding. You know, as I paint this scene, I'm reminded about a particular day many years ago when Josh was just about 2 or 3, and there was this beautiful twilight scene, and he looked up into the sky and he said, "Doesn't it look as if Mama took a ladder and painted that?" And I thought that was such a cute thing to say. Well, those were those glorious baby days. Josh is a fine young man now, and I am so proud of him. He often advises me and gives me feedback about my paintings on how I could do something better, or a suggestion on what I could try out. And that's interesting. I'm grateful for that. Well, the foreground is starting to look really interesting and nice. What I love about these alcohol inks is the translucent effect. It makes every color look so unique. Josh doesn't know I'm doing this video. I'm doing it all on my own without him being around, because it's meant to be as a surprise for him. I'm adding the first layer of my leaves now, using just a little magenta, and then I'll go over it with another layer. Just dabbing the brush everywhere, very lightly, of course, just to give the impression of leaves. I want to add some of the colors of the foreground to those leaves, like right there, a little yellow, maybe to represent where the sun would hit those leaves at that particular time. Of course, this is meant to be an abstract painting, but I always like to add a touch of realism to my abstract pieces. I think that's what makes the whole thing a little more intriguing. I'm nearly finished with the layers of this tree, and I begin with the next one now. I'm adding just a touch of moss green as my first layer, very, very lightly, and darkening it slightly. And then I'll add a few more layers and different shades. Let's see how that looks. Maybe I should add a little green to the other tree as well. Let's wait until it's completely dry and then I'll build up on it. Again, I'm adding very, very light shades of green right in the front, and then I'll build it up. You know, I always tell my students it is such an incredible blessing to be able to feel, see, and sense nature's beauty all around us. And when we try to recreate this beauty, either through language or through art, as I'm doing now, we are filled with even more awe at the vast array of colors in a sunset, for example, or in the twilight, or in the shade of those autumn leaves. It's absolutely divine. And speaking of the shade of leaves, I'm adding green now to my tree. That's another layer. I'm just trying to give it a little more depth. You know, I must keep dabbing and either adding or lifting color just until I am perfectly satisfied with how the leaves turn out. I think the tree is looking quite nice now. Maybe I'll add some blossoms too at the very end. Yes, right there. I think that adds a nice touch. Let me know what you think in the comments below. What would you do to embellish the tree or to add something more to an abstract twilight scene like that? I think the tree is looking rather nice now. Just a few more touches with my brush and we are nearly done with the trees. And then I'll add some grass in the foreground. Just little things growing between the rocks. There are many places of untouched beauty like this in India, where the colors are so soothing yet vibrant as to be almost unreal. There are some of those hilly regions here in India where when the sun hits at a particular time, the whole place seems to glow with a most magical light. It's enchanting. And that's when you begin to appreciate even more those wonderful hues, the many, many hues, the different shades, the translucent effects, everything just touched so magically with different shades of light. What a divine masterpiece our world is, and all we can do is to try and recreate it as best we can. The foreground is nearly complete and I'm going to add just a few final finishing touches before I call it complete. I hope you've had as much fun as I did. And I certainly hope that you feel inspired to try using these alcohol inks. You can create some wonderful, wonderful pieces. Do give it a try. And I'm nearly done with that final layer. There, that's all ready. I like it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comments. I hope I have inspired you to paint your dreams. Make them come alive on canvas or paper, and you will be so thrilled with the result. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe. Happy painting!